My back hurts. Every part of my body always hurts. Writing this script was insanely painful because I had to sit up to type, and the joints in my fingers hurt because of some currently unnameable disorder that afflicts my joints. To cope with the insane amount of pain I am in, I use a number of tools. One you have seen on this channel is my crutch, but I am using a heat pack right now. I use my cane, I take painkillers and muscle relaxers, and a number of prescription drugs. And some of you might be hearing this and see a problem with it. It's not respectable of me to do these things. What if I get addicted to painkillers? Why am I using a cane if I'm 15 years old? And here we run into quite a philosophical question. Am I making disabled people look bad?
Hi! Welcome to the Shroomi Show. My name is Shroomi and I'm Cinnamoroll in real life. I'm a non-binary lesbian who's experimenting with neopronouns, nyandesu.
Stop. Some of you had a visceral reaction to what I just said, and I want to ask you, why did you have that reaction? Did I say something morally wrong? Is there something wrong with being an otherkin or experimenting with neopronouns? It's just weird. Well, what's wrong with being weird? You see, I grew up being weird. Strange, even. Terrible allergies, neurodivergent, curly messy hair, asthma, poor, as weird as a cis-presenting white guy can get. I was placed into a different category to my peers, boxed off, marked as other. I wasn't respectable. And we can argue the semantics of the classism and ableism and even a dash of racist rhetoric that I faced, but that would be counterproductive. Instead, I want you to keep in mind that I haven't changed since then, and yet I'm relatively well liked by everyone who comes across me on the internet. How can that be? So it's common knowledge that among normal people, I would be regarded as cringe. I'm one of them they-thems with my Cinnamoroll ears and aversion to human contact. Ugh, excuse me. I'm just a little shilly. I'm a little shilly guy. According to Daikanjo's definition on Urban Dictionary, cringe culture is a group of insecure teenagers who make fun of each other's interests so that they can feel validated. This is by far my favorite definition that I've been able to find. However, it doesn't lay out all of the faults of cringe culture. Cringe culture, to cite a less biased definition, is a community of people making fun of each other for their interests. The most targeted communities tend to be ones marked as other. Emos, bronies, furries, weebs, and age regressors are just a couple examples, along with various kinks that I will not be researching or elaborating on, as I am a minor. Some of these communities are guilty of being more than cringe and fringe into illegal or amoral territory, such as the zoophiles of the furry community and the people who sexualizes the horses from the kids show. Don't fuck horses. Process in which all of the members of a community are criminalized for the criminal behavior of one section of their community is, to borrow a term from ContraPoints, guilt by association. Guilt by association, in this context, is the grouping of amoral or harmful behaviors with non-harmful behaviors. For example, the various sexualization of the horses from the kids show is used to criminalize anyone who enjoys said kids show, even those who don't want to fuck the horses. But there is something much deeper to this. Have you ever met a person who is just a little too into something? Maybe their Pokemon card collection is a little too extensive. They have way too many Squishmallows, or just one too many frog plushies. Aha! You're being ableist! You see, the communities I named earlier all share one thing in common. They tend to attract neurodivergent people. Emos are usually affected by depression or personality disorders. Furries and weebs are usually drawn to escapism from internal or external conflicts that result in trauma. Age regressors regress because of trauma. These are all woven in with things that tend to attract autistic people specifically. Autistic people are more likely to be childlike or enjoy kids' media, therefore we're more likely to be age regressors or bronies. And when autistic people are into something, we're really into it. A special interest is a fixed and intense interest in a concept, piece of media, or anything, really. These fixations can last for years or be lifelong. The most famous examples of special interests are dinosaurs and trains. Mine was Harry Potter for many years, and is now video essays and philosophy. The autistic tendency to have special interests is regarded by many as cringe, which is in itself an ableist piece of rhetoric. Cringe culture actively seeks to destroy autistic traits, to criminalize and suppress, to put them in a box and mark them as other. Cringe culture has been weaponized into a knife against our collective autistic throats. If we move too much, we're gonna get our throats slit. However, there is still hope. 2020 was a year in which we all had to take a step back and assess what we were doing. We were all forced to take a deep breath and look at our situation. People assessed how they behaved online and realized the harm they were doing. Similar to what I talked about in my last video about SS Sniper Wolf and how I had that whole mental breakdown. Others turned to TikTok and found leftism to be a comforting way to fight for their human rights. And in the midst of it all came a new culture, one that seeked to be accepting of all. As I am writing this, it is a week until the end of October, and there has been a new art challenge going around. It's called Cringe-tober, and it actively embraces the culture of things usually regarded as cringe. On Tumblr, my mutuals use emoticons and say ooh woo. I see people with type quirks all the time. For once, the people who seek to criminalize us are in the minority. Anyone who unironically uses the word cringe is ostracized. However, this is mainly online. If I told my grandmother I use they, he pronouns, she'd flip her shit. This brings us back to what the video was originally about, respectability politics. Respectability politics is a theory that maybe we would have human rights if there weren't so many cringe-ass transies. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but the logic basically boils down to that. Respectability is defined by those who are supposed to be doing the respecting, and what they respect depends on their beliefs and pre-existing biases shaped by life experience. For example, there is no representation of teenage cane users in media, even though a cane is one of the most common mobility aids built for long-term use. There is nobody quite like me in media. There can't be. I'm unique in my blend of disorders and queerness, and therefore I am not respectable because nobody has seen anything like me, and vice versa. This is what I call the respectability paradox. One cannot be respectable to an outsider if the outsider is not used to what is supposed to be respected. Of course, TikTok's leftists will probably hear me say this and say, this is why we need more representation in media. I disagree. Not because I think we shouldn't have representation in media, but just because there are too many types of people to represent them all. To say we just need to represent everyone requires a level of naivete that I am jealous of. Respectability politics seek to appeal to the oppressor by taking on behavior that the oppressor deems respectable. This means acting more like the oppressor. For example, let's say you're black and you live in a largely white town. Don your respectable attire, you straighten your hair, and refrain from speaking in AAVE, even if it's your native dialect. I've seen this happen in my largely white town. This can also play into racist rhetoric and tendencies, especially tokenism, but I am not one to speak on this as a white boy. Another way respectability politics manifest is via in-group policing, when people within the oppressed group criminalize behavior not deemed respectable. Victim blaming is an extremized form of in-group policing. In a rather depressing survey taken by British paper The Independent, 41% of women believed that wearing revealing clothes invites unwanted sexual advances. The number rose to 55% among men, of course. If we reward that, that seems to imply that some people deserve to get raped for an oppressible behavior, wearing revealing clothes. Which, no one deserves to get raped. When we return to the question I asked at the beginning of this video, if I make disabled people look bad, you need to ask yourself, well, what happens if I do? Am I making people more ableist, or are they trying to justify their ableism based on my perceived faults? Would anything change if I didn't have these faults? I'm in high school, or I was supposed to be. You see, I was pulled out of school in favor of homeschooling for a number of reasons. One of these being that I was getting relentlessly bullied by my peers. People were harassing me, fake-claiming me, calling after me in the halls, kicking my cane out from under me. Now, if I didn't wear a trench coat every day until I had to stop when I went on crutches, would this still have happened? Of fucking course it would! I wasn't getting bullied on basis of me being cringe, I was getting bullied on basis of me using a cane. It was ableism, and a dash of homophobia and transphobia, not based on something that wasn't respectable. The only way I would stop getting bullied by my peers was if I wasn't disabled, or if I didn't present as visibly disabled. If I just powered through all the pain I was in, limping through the hall, I would have gotten bullied less, but I would have been much worse off. The key problem with respectability politics is that it doesn't address the actual biases that are keeping the oppressed from being respected. Well, maybe if you weren't so weird, you wouldn't be oppressed. In this case, it was me using my cane. But if I didn't use my cane, I would be much worse off. I would be in pain all the time, I would start limping again, I would have much less energy, etc. It is actively to my own detriment to be seen as respectable. And it is to yours too. Everyone is holding back part of themselves. There are very few of us who aren't, and it is bad for your mental health to hold back parts of yourself. The best thing to do is to safely present your whole self whenever you can. But there are still remnants of cringe culture in the deep recesses of the internet. How does one prevent themselves from falling back into it? This is where the real fun begins. In order to end oppression, wow, that's a fucking sentence. To end cringe culture requires a complete change of mindset and a lot of time. It does not require the oppressed to stop acting oppressible or the cringy to stop acting cringe. It requires that we draw some inspiration from everything we've learned in today's video and create a new code of ethics for interacting with people online. We have to lay a framework for interacting with cringe in the future. I chose to frame this as a series of questions you ask yourself before interacting with something regarded as cringe. And when you ask yourself these questions, be very mindful of the answers and what they entail. Be also aware of your biases that may influence your answers and your opinions and personal stance. Number 1, is the person spreading harmful rhetoric genuinely encouraging people to hurt themselves or hurting themselves or others? Is the harm they're inflicting major or minor? Always keep in mind that the worst case scenario is real and could happen, and be mindful how this current scenario relates to it. 2, is it moral? Are they sexualizing kids or kids' characters? Are they trying to fuck a horse? When you think of morality, what do you think of? Are your morals religious or secular? Are you sure they're secular? 3, will they change their behavior if you interact? Most of the time they will not. If they seem like they don't realize the harm they're doing, interact with them in a calm and civil manner. And remember to always assume good faith. If someone is acting in bad faith, simply disengage from the interaction. In a lot of cases, interacting with someone stupid does nothing but depress you. Don't depress yourself when you don't have to. You do not need to get personally involved in every single piece of discourse on Twitter. Let me say that again. You do not need to get involved with every single piece of discourse on Twitter. 4, take a deep breath and a pause before responding to any. Oftentimes we can get caught up in the moment and respond purely out of emotion rather than logic. It would be illogical of me, paradoxically, for me to expect you to have no emotion in your answer, but logic needs to be the primary factor when you're interacting with someone like that. Make sure to cool off at least a little before engaging. If everyone adhered to these principles, if more people adhered to these principles, we would have a much better internet. And that's all we can really hope for, is to just make everything a little bit better. Thanks for watching. That was the Shroomi Show for today. Bye.
Nyandasu.
Benum.